All right, so now I'm just going to finish up some last coloring. I've got my banners colored, I've got my text colored, I've got layer styles on, and I started coloring the hamster on my duotone layer with 69% opacity. If I want to be a little bit bolder with it, I'll color it on the layer underneath at 100% opacity, and you still see that the inner glow and everything is going to affect it, which livens up my flat color a little bit. And then, of course, as long as I stay behind my vector outline, I can also just create a new layer, and I can call it hamster color. And I can just paint what I want, how I want, on that layer. Problem is, our family hamster is quite dark, so I'm going to have to make him a little bit brighter to show up here. Again, you can steal colors from yourself. And I'm actually introducing a little full spectrum into it now. Giving him some oranges and reds, and grays, even though he's really just a really dark brown hamster. A little twinkle to his eyes, and his ears, his paws. If I want it really full spectrum, I'll get something a little cooler, like a green. Paint that a little bit in there too, to knock it back. Now here's a good example of where a color hold might help. A little highlight in the hamster's eye. At the very top, make a new layer. Pick a bright color. And I can just put a little highlight in. Make his eyes twinkle a little bit. Maybe on his ear too. Remember, those are called color holds because they go over the top of the black line. Put a little bit of that on the outline of the stars too. Give them a little something something. Little sparkle. And color holds don't always need to be bright special effects. I could also paint in shadows over the top. Do a duotone that way. Okay. So now what? Now we have to deal with the background. The gray is not doing it for me, right? The gray is pretty limiting, not very exciting. But it shows me what a 50% valued color would look like. So I think I have to decide, do I want my poster to go brighter or do I want it to go darker as a background? Sharpen in those highlights a little bit. Okay, maybe give him a pink nose. Just can't leave the hamster alone. Okay, so since these are color holds, they're going over the black lines because my black lines are pretty heavy, but then I can erase back from them and make them a little bit sharper. Kind of open it up. All right. So now, do I want to go darker than 50% gray for my background? It doesn't mean I have to go to black. Maybe I do a value that's 55% or 70%, right? Or do I go lighter? Not white, but maybe, you know, like a 20% gray, something like that. So let's fill it with something. Let's try something bold. So instead of white, black, or gray, let's pick a color. Let's try the brightest, lightest valued color there is, most saturated, yellow. Boom. And I can play with hue saturation to get it just where I want it. Do I want it a little bit? It's pretty saturated. Do I want it greener? Do I want it more golden? It's not changing as much as I expected it to. There we go, it's catching up with me. So a little bit more golden perhaps. A little bit paler perhaps. It's not bad. I can think of my text and I can give it layer styles as well. Oh, I'm going to unlock it. So for instance, I could give it a color overlay, replace all the blacks with a color. Give it a slight gradient. Yeah, it doesn't really work. Reverse it. Have lots of options here, but I don't think so. Maybe just give it a slight amount of red. Just a tiny bit. Give it an outer glow. That sharpens it up a little bit. Let's dial that back. And we can give it a colored drop shadow, right? Maybe introduce a little bit of coolness into it and a low opacity. Yeah, it's nice. And of course I can turn those all off and on, but let's see what that did for our image on the yellow background. Now I chose yellow because it's pretty darn intense, right? So how can we make that work a little bit better now? Let us, oh, I wanted the tree behind to kind of show up too. So maybe I try something else. Let's copy the yellow and let's change it using hue saturation. Let's change it to a green. But do I want it to be a darker green or a lighter green? How muted? Oh, that's not bad. And then I can play between the two with opacity. So first I was trying to find the color and the value of the background that I want. Maybe a gradient overlay on that green. Yeah. Let's try an inner glow around it. That's kind of broken up a little bit with some noise, low opacity. Yeah, this is starting to work. Okay, But everything, the problem with digital coloring for me is that everything's always so clean. So let's say that this is what I like, but I don't like how clean that background is. My graphics are already so smooth and clean. So what I'm going to do, I'll save it here, and then I'm going to go to Chrome, and I'm going to search for, let's see, a rough paper texture fill, just like we did when we were doing compositing. But now we're looking for just a texture that might apply to the poster I'm doing, my Christmas card. I don't want it to look cheesy. I want it to look kind of more hand done, right? So there are lots. Some of them are tighter. Some of them are really close and zoomed in. It doesn't really matter what the color is. It matters what the texture is for me, because I'm doing it as an overlay. That's kind of nice. Let's look at that. And then this one looks pretty good. Let's look at that. So what I can do is I can actually steal these in this new version of Photoshop right from online. Go right over my background. Put it across the whole image like so. It's already kind of a gradient built into this. I'm not sure if I love that or not, but I can soften it out by just spreading it out. Or by rotating it, as long as it fills everything. This is just looks like a drywall texture. Okay. And then to apply it, I'm simply going to use overlay mode. And that will put it onto my green background. And I can play with its opacity. Give that slight texture. If I want it more subtle, I can say soft light. And you can see how that texture now comes through very gently. Or pin light. Bring it through more dramatically. But I tend to like how overlay mode works and then just lowering the opacity when I'm just doing pure texture overlays. Now some people like to do that over everything. See, to make it look more like a hand-done card that's printed on paper. Do it over every step, but I like to keep it underneath my vector work. But maybe keep it on top of some of my coloring. Maybe not all of my coloring, but some of it, and then just take its opacity down a little bit. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. So what's nice about that is then in all of my coloring, you see that texture will come through. It doesn't look quite so digital anymore. Except where I want it to look more digital, like in the color holds. Everything's very subtle. And since I'm kind of going for this tattoo aesthetic, that might be a nice way to go. Let's see. Other things I need to resolve. You'll notice here, my banner needs to go behind this. That shouldn't be a problem. And it's going to take my banner outline. Just move that behind. Shortcut for that is Command left bracket to move a layer behind. Went too far. Computer's trying to catch up with me here. All right, so that's moving it behind, but then the problem is the coloring comes over the top of it. So what I'm going to do to make that work, and this is what you have to do at the end sometimes, is I need to make a duplicate of that vector layer, turn off the vector layer, and now rasterize it, and then erase away. So my answer is generally keep it as a vector always, But you can turn it off and rasterize it if you need to.